Good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday morning to you. Welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. Hey, listen, have you checked out the lessons from Preterist Pilgrim Weekend? I tell you what, folks, there are some wonderful, wonderful lessons. I just finished a few moments ago looking at Al Person, my good friend from Australia. Listen, isn't technology incredible? I mean, good grief. He films in Australia, sends it, and we're able to offer it to you. I mean, it's just absolutely incredible. Anyway, I just finished his lesson number 1, showing the covenantal context for Daniel chapter 9, and he was absolutely correct. You know, most of the times we go to Daniel chapter 9 and we just jump right in to Daniel 9:24 and following in the discussion of the 70 weeks, and we forget that the entire foundation, the very reason for Daniel 9:24 to 27 is the covenantal background springing from the law of blessings and cursings, and specifically Leviticus chapter 26. I mean, over and over and over, we find this covenantal language, and it was therefore absolutely stunning to me when not long ago I had some individuals tell me that the judgment on Jerusalem was not even related to covenant. I was like, hello? And of course they were claiming that specifically about AD 70, even though Daniel 9 was predicting the destruction in AD 70, and even though the entire context of Daniel 9 is covenantal judgment, these individuals, so utterly desperate to make some kind of an argument against covenant eschatology, invented the doctrine that AD 70 was not a covenantal judgment. I mean, it just shows you, as the old saying goes, or my saying goes, argumentum ad desperatum. Desperate people make desperate arguments. They're not logical, they're not biblical, they're certainly not true. So anyway, be sure to check out the lessons from Preterist Pilgrim Weekend. They are archived now. And do not forget, folks, for the rest of July 2021, all the way through August of 2021, the Preterist Pilgrim Weekend book and material special pricing. If you order $25 or more, okay, during this period of time, we will refund your shipping. Yes, it will charge you, but we will refund the shipping. And on top of that, we'll give you a 15% discount over the total bill, or off of the total bill. I mean, look, this is a very, very significant discount. It's why we can't do it forever. So take advantage of it. Some of you already have. And this is a fantastic time to save some very serious money on a ton of material. Okay, we're in Acts chapter 3. We are examining the doctrine of the absent master. Acts chapter 3 is considered by most commentators one of those irrefutable, we are told, proofs of a yet future coming of the Lord. Very few commentators differ with that. And so while I certainly agree that it was a prediction of the, quote, second coming, unquote, while I certainly agree that it was a prediction of the coming, the return of the absent master, I absolutely disagree that it has anything to do with the yet future coming of the Lord at the end of the current Christian age or at the end of time. Now, I've been promising you I'm going to deal with this. Okay, point number 1. I've already demonstrated in the last 2 lessons, number 1, the importance of seeing the significance and the relationship between the ministry of John the Baptizer and this coming of the Lord. John was to restore all things. As Elijah, Christ would come to restore all things. Those are not 2 separate restorations. Those are not 2 separate comings of the Lord / judgments. No, it's John preparing the way for the coming of the Lord. John would initiate the restoration. Christ would consummate that at the return of the absent master. Secondly, this return of the absent master, as I shared with you yesterday, would be in fulfillment of God's Old Covenant promises of all of the prophets who have ever spoken since the beginning of the world. Moses, Samuel, and all who have ever spoken. Therefore, wherever you put this coming of the Lord of Acts 3, for the restoration of all things, to consummate the restoration of all things, it is there that the Old Testament is finally, completely fulfilled. Point number 3. This word that is translated as restoration, and of course Peter uses the term restoration of all things. That word restoration is an amazingly important word. It is the Greek word apokatastasis. Now look, and I'm not going to take the time to document this from the Old Testament. In my book, Like Father, Like Son, I have an extensive discussion of what I'm sharing with you in brief this morning. So you might avail yourself on that. Take advantage of the Preterist Pilgrim Weekend, special pricing. Get that and another book or two, 15% discount, free shipping. But in the Old Testament, apokatastasis, it's used in Jeremiah 16. It is used in two different kind of contexts. Number one, it is used of the return from the Babylonian captivity, restoration to the land, restoration to the city, restoration of the temple. It's used in that very prosaic, literalistic manner. It is also used in messianic prophecies to speak of the coming of Christ to establish the messianic kingdom. Now, I've already shared with you the nature of that kingdom as it related to the ministry of John. John, as Elijah, was to restore all things. Well, according to Isaiah chapter 40, he was supposed to fill up all the valleys, lower all the mountains, and build a highway for the Lord. A highway for the coming of the Lord. The coming of the Lord for what? The kingdom. But wait, what was the nature of John's, quote, restoration work? Well, it had nothing to do with material creation, had nothing to do with building a literal highway in the desert, had nothing whatsoever to do with filling up literal valleys. Nothing. So here is John who would initiate the work of restoration. The work of restoration that was foretold by the Old Testament prophets. You know, the ones that Peter spoke of in Acts chapter 3. Moses, Samuel, and all who have ever spoken. This is the predicted fulfillment of all of those Old Testament prophets. Now, here's point number 1. Remember, Jesus said, not one jot or one tittle would pass from the law. And remember, the law prophesied through the feast days. Not one jot, not one tittle would pass from the law until it was all fulfilled. So until all of those Old Covenant prophecies of the restoration of all things took place, then the law, well, to be redundant, was not fulfilled. And until the law was fulfilled, it can never pass away. Therefore, restoration at the final fulfillment of the Old Covenant eschatological prophecies, restoration at the end of the Old Covenant system. Now, I want you to go with me to Hebrews chapter 9. In Hebrews chapter 9, the author discusses the Day of Atonement and its typological significance. It's typological, foreshadowing, prophetic function. Now remember, in Hebrews chapter 10 and verse 1, the writer is going to talk about everything that he's just talked about in regard to the Day of Atonement. And he says, for the law, having present, active, indicative, a shadow of the good things that are about to come. So the writer is pointing us directly at the old law the law concerning the Day of Atonement, i.e. Leviticus chapter 16, and said that practice, Yom Kippur, part of the law, was, when he wrote, still prophetic. Now, notice what he says. Hebrews 9, verse 6 and following. When these things had been thus prepared, the priest always went into the first part of the tabernacle, performing the services. But into the second part, the high priest, now the word went is italicized, but it's not in a past tense. It's present. Goes in alone once a year, not without blood, which he offered for himself and for the sins of the people committed in ignorance. The Holy Spirit indicating this, that the way into the holiest of all is not yet made manifest, while the first tabernacle is still standing. Now, that's not talking about the physical building still standing. No, it's talking about the law having standing, having validity, still being imposed, which he says. It is symbolic for the present time. That's his present time, in which most gifts and sacrifices are, present active, offered, which cannot make him who performed the service perfect in regard to the conscience, being concerned with foods, drinks, various washings, now watch this, and earthly ordinances imposed. That's the Greek word epikaimai, meaning legally imposed. Imposed as in binding. Imposed as in mandatory. Imposed as valid, having standing. That word standing is from the Greek word stasis, and in the context it means having standing. So, as long as these foods, drinks, various washings, and fleshly ordinances had validity, there was no entrance into the most holy place. Now, this is amazing. And I'm out of time, but let me simply make this observation. There is a good part of Christianity today that says that when the faithful Christian dies, they don't get to go to heaven. They go to Hades to wait. In my fellowship of the churches of Christ, that's fundamental. And I have, in several debates with my Church of Christ brethren, I have asked them, where does the faithful child of God die or go when they die physically? Now, before they caught on and saw the train coming, every single one of them would say they go to Hades, they go to Abraham's bosom, they do not go to heaven. And I would simply point out the only reason that anyone had to go to Hades, number one, the Old Testament was still binding, and as a result of the Old Testament still binding, there was no forgiveness. Therefore, if you say that when the faithful child of God, when they die today, they go to Hades, you are saying one of two things. You are saying they are not forgiven. Number two, you are saying the law of Moses is valid. It's still binding. It is still imposed. Because as long as Torah remained imposed, no entrance into the most holy place. And then the writer says that the law of Moses, the Old Testament, would remain imposed until the time of Reformation. And being out of time, I will ask you to do some homework on the meaning of apokatastasis in Acts 3 and Reformation from the Greek word diorthosis, and we'll discuss it on the flip side. See you there.